Hi everyone, welcome to another Business Club book blog. And this time around, I'm reviewing a book called Flourish by Martin Seligman. So, this book is all about what makes us happy. It raises the question, what is happiness really? And is happiness even the right thing to aim for? Now, this book interested me because I've been a strength scope practitioner for a while now. I've been doing a lot around strengths philosophy and coaching, and I was interested to know about the positive psychology that sits behind it. Martin Seligman is one of the founders of positive psychology, so I was really keen to hear a little bit about the science behind the theory. So, is this book going to tell me what makes us happy? And is it a useful tool of finding out what we can do to improve the quality of our lives? Now, one of the first questions that the book addresses is what is happiness? Now, Martin Seligman's previous work, Authentic Happiness, did try to address this question, but he wasn't happy with it. In fact, he wasn't happy with the title either. He didn't think it was about authenticity, and he thought that happiness probably wasn't the right word. He much preferred well being. Happiness perhaps describes simply being in a good mood, and quite often when people are asked about their happiness, they're just asked to report how they're feeling at the moment. But Seligman wanted something a little bit more concrete, something that could be more scientifically proven. He also decided that he hadn't quite identified all of the elements in happiness in his original book. He felt that happiness was a combination of a number of different elements combined, and that perhaps he had missed a couple out in his first book that he wrote. He also points to the fact that much of psychology in the past has been about trying to cure unhappiness, and he points out that getting rid of unhappiness isn't quite the same as working out what makes people happy. He also points out that too often unhappiness is attempted to be solved by medication, and he points out that antidepressants or medical interventions are only provide temporary relief, and even then only really effective for people with the most severe cases. But people with mild or moderate depression need help too. So, is there something that could be done to identify the elements that make people's well-being improve? What are these, and how do we help people develop those skills? In this book, Martin Seligman lays out his criteria for what makes us happy in his PERMA model. Now, he has three criteria that he applied to any element that he identified as making people flourish. These were that, first of all, it had to increase your overall well being, so it's not just about feeling good. The second one is it must be elements that we are drawn towards or that we pursue for their own sake, so it's a very intrinsic driver. The third one is that each of the elements must be independent of the others, so they can't be dependent on any other element. There must be different things that we can bring in to improve our well-being. So here's what PERMA stands for. The first one is positive emotion. So, of course, positive emotion isn't happiness in itself, but it is important for our well being. It is good to feel good. So, this is just about feeling good, about joy, about comfort, ecstasy, life satisfaction generally. I suppose this could be the kind of things you might describe when you're getting a good dopamine hit. The second thing is engagement. So this one's a little bit more subjective, but this is when you are in a state of flow, when you're just so absorbed or engaged by something that you're just totally absorbed in the task. Time stops, you lose yourself. It's something that's just inherently interesting to you. Now, it might be tough, so it's not like positive emotion. You might find the work required arduous, but ultimately it's satisfying and engaging, which is why engagement is the second element. Then comes meaning, being part of something bigger than yourself, a sense of purpose, something that's of consequence. If we have a sense of meaning or purpose in our lives, this increases our well-being. Now, here are the two extra elements that Seligman wanted to add in addition to his work on authentic happiness a little bit earlier. One of these is accomplishment. So this is an achievement you sort of pursue for its own sake. So it's not just about achieving what you're told to do or what you're prescribed to do at work, but you personally just are drawn to this. It's something that you get a real sense of achievement for. This could be in the world of work, and this is where many of us find our achievement, but it also could be in the home or in our hobbies or in our social life as well. And then the final element of the PERMA model is positive relationships. So these are absolutely key. So think about the last time you felt really happy or felt joyful. Chances are someone else was with you, or perhaps even a group of people, family, friends, or part of a social group. Other people are usually present when we are experiencing happiness and when we are flourishing. And positive relationships are the key to well-being. So this is about building a solid set of relationships with those who you love and trust. Two things that can really help with this is an act of kindness. So this was tested. Apparently, it produces the best momentary increase of well-being out of all the people that were tested. It's also suggested that this is the best antidepressant as well, is to do an act of kindness and build close, positive relationships with those around you as well. So, do you have someone in your life who you'd feel perfectly comfortable phoning at 4 in the morning? If the answer is yes, then chances are you have more positive relationships and perhaps better well-being. So how can we apply all of this? How do we use the PERMA model? Well, one of the more interesting ways in which Seligman applied this thinking is in a school in Australia, and they did some exercises with the students to try and build their ability to flourish in all five of these areas. He gave the students a number of exercises which were surprisingly effective. One of them was to give the students a gratitude journal. All they had to do was spend 10 minutes or so at the end of each day listing three things that made them happy or three things that they were grateful for. Before they go to bed, they write these down and ask themselves, why did these good things happen? They found that students that did this exercise over a period of weeks were much, much happier. They also did another exercise where they asked the students to think of a random act of kindness, but not just to plan it, but to carry it out as well. A third one was to write a letter to someone who has really impacted your life. So someone who's really influenced you in a positive way, to whom you're very grateful. But not just to write the letter, but actually pop it in the post and send it as well. What they found was that when they did these exercises with the students reported significantly less instances of feeling depressed. They had higher ambitions, which is great to hear, but the school as a whole had less conduct issues. Another key area in the book where Seligman has applied these principles is in the United States military as well, trying to make soldiers ready for combat by working on their emotional readiness for war zones. Um, he noticed one of the interesting parts of this for me was that he talked about PTSD, and he said that after people experience trauma, flashbacks and sleeplessness are quite normal. This is the body's way of coping with a traumatic situation. But he said that PTSD wasn't inevitable, and instead he talked about post-traumatic growth. He talked about instances where people have experienced trauma but actually had some enhanced abilities or skills off the back of what they've learned from all of this. And he feels that PTSD is over prescribed, if you like, and that actually maybe we should look a little bit more to how we can help people grow from trauma rather than just labeling them with post-traumatic distress. We accept Seligman's model of wellness, or flourishing if you like. What does this mean for us as a society as a whole? And one of the most interesting thoughts about this in the book for me was the idea that GDP is a really poor measure of any society. Now, at the moment, we measure how well we're doing as a country by looking at GDP. And there was a time when gross domestic product was a valid measure. During the Industrial Revolution, when GDP shot up, standards of living went up, and of course working conditions went up also. This was a sign of a country in growing and improving. But these days most people have their basic needs met, so GDP is no longer a good measure of how well a country is doing. And Seligman suggests that maybe measuring well-being is a better measure of a country's success than GDP, and I think there's really something in this as well. Now, if you look at countries around the world, there are many Latin countries that have a very low GDP but have very high levels of happiness. Conversely, there are many European countries with very high GDP but very low levels of happiness. And if you look at the United States, over the last 50 years, their GDP has tripled, but they report no greater increase in happiness levels among the citizens. So wealth can help you with the positive emotion part. More money or a higher standard of living after a certain point will make you feel good, at least momentarily. But if you think about those other parts of the PERMA model, achievements, your meaning, your purpose, your relationships, it does absolutely nothing to affect the other elements of well-being. So this really begs the question, how do we measure the standard of living and, of course, the happiness of our citizens? So what did I think of the book? Well, this was a really good insight into happiness, or should I say, well being. This gives us some good ideas about what it is that truly makes us flourish. And of course, it's great to know that this is backed up by science. There is rigor behind this thinking. It was also really good to hear about positive psychology and all of the work that went behind it. I was really surprised to hear just how recent it is. Seligman started publishing this book back in 2010. So this thinking about the way that we view people's well-being, about being happy or flourishing, as opposed to simply not being unhappy, is surprisingly recent. My one criticism of the book would be that sometimes the parts of the book can be a little dry. There's just a little bit too long spent on Martin Seligman's anecdotes about his career. Don't get me wrong, he's got a really impressive career. He's added so much in his working life to the field of psychology, but sometimes the personal anecdotes run a little dry and they go on a little bit too long. That said, it shouldn't put you off. There are still some practical things in there, and of course, he does give links to his website, which provide tools for measuring your strengths and other flourishing or wellness or happiness tests you can do for yourself. He also has a simple strengths identification questionnaire in the back of the book as well. So there's plenty in there that's going to help you identify what it is that makes us flourish. I definitely recommend you read the book. I think it changes our approach to the way we think about well-being, and I think there's plenty in there for any manager, any worker, and I think any family member also. I really enjoyed the book. I hope you do too.